Power, legacy, secrets that shaped the world, 2 presidents, 1 family, and a chain of hidden deals linking war rooms, oil fields, and secret societies. Behind every handshake, another door closed to the public. They didn't just inherit America's story. They rewrote it. Welcome to the Bush dynasty. 322, and the tomb, 2 presidents, 1 secret society. Yale's Skull and Bones taps just 15 seniors a year, yet the Bush family produced 3 bonesmen across 2 generations. Senator Prescott Bush, 1917, George H.W. Bush, 1948, and George W. Bush, 1968. In 2004, when NBC's Tim Russert pressed President Bush on Bones, he grinned. "It's so secret we can't talk about it." The same year, Bush ran against another bonesman, John Kerry, an improbable face-off given the club's tiny membership. Bones lore includes ritual oaths in a windowless tomb, a cryptic number, 322, and a Rolodex of alumni in finance, diplomacy, and intelligence. Fans call it harmless tradition. Critics say it's the quintessential pipeline of American elite influence. With 2 presidents and a senator in 1 family, is this coincidence, or an old boys network quietly doing what it was built to do? And in the wider orbit of elite retreats, Bohemian Grove, the secluded California campground for power brokers, has long been reported as a place both Bush presidents attended, adding to the mystique around who meets whom off-camera. Seized in wartime, Prescott Bush, Thyssen money, and the 1942 freeze. On October 20, 1942, amid World War II, the U.S. government seized the Union Banking Corporation, UBC, under the Trading with the Enemy Act. Among UBC's directors, Prescott Bush, future U.S. Senator and family patriarch. UBC's business tied into assets of German steel magnate Fritz Thyssen, an early backer of Hitler. The government's vesting orders published that fall transferred ownership to the alien property custodian. Historians debate culpability versus proximity. Many American and European firms had entanglements with German industry before and early in the war. There's no court finding that Prescott Bush was a Nazi sympathizer, but the documented seizures are politically radioactive to this day, especially when later generations ascended to the Oval Office. Should the family have grappled with this legacy more directly, earlier, and would it have changed anything? Barbara and the Great Beast? The viral Crowley parentage theory. The Internet's most persistent Bush rumor claims Barbara Pierce Bush was secretly the daughter of British occultist Aleister Crowley, the Great Beast 666. The tale hinges on a real Europe trip by Barbara's mother, Pauline Robinson Pierce, in the mid-1920s, and then leaps to a sensational conclusion with no documentary evidence. Reputable fact checks trace the claim to satirical posts and tabloid recycling. Official records list Barbara as the daughter of Marvin and Pauline Pierce, full stop. Why does the myth endure? Because it has everything a meme loves: a notorious figure, a famous family, and a grainy, suggestive collage. As rumors go, it's cinematic, just not supported. Is this one more example of how internet folklore hardens into fact when it flatters our appetite for scandal? The 537-vote finish, Miami's Brooks Brothers riot, and a 5-4 Supreme Court. November 22, 2000, in Miami-Dade's election offices, sharply dressed GOP operatives pounded on glass and shouted down a hand recount, images the press dubbed the Brooks Brothers riot. The manual count stalled. The statewide knife edge continued. On December 12th, Bush versus Gore halted further recounts by a 5-4 vote, effectively handing Florida and the presidency to George W. Bush. The dissent warned the ruling risked public trust. Supporters argued a uniform standard didn't exist, and deadlines loomed. What's beyond dispute, the optics were indelible. Organized pressure, halted recounts, and a Supreme Court finish that hardened partisan memories for a generation. The number that stuck, 537 votes, Florida's certified margin. History's verdict depends on where you stood that winter. Powell's vial, no stockpiles, the Iraq WMD credibility gap. On February 5, 2003, Secretary of State Colin Powell held up a small vial prop at the UN to dramatize claims that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. The invasion began March 20, 2003. After the fall of Baghdad, the Iraq Survey Group issued the Duofer Report, September 30, 2004. No active stockpiles at the time of the invasion, though Saddam retained intent and expertise. Powell later called the episode a blot on his record. Critics called it the defining credibility failure of the era. The human cost was staggering. Thousands of U.S. fatalities and large-scale Iraqi civilian deaths over nearly 9 years. For the Bush White House, the unanswered question remains: was this a catastrophic intel error, bureaucratic groupthink, or the hard sell of a war already chosen? Christmas Eve. Pardons, Iran-Contra's curtain call. On December 24, 1992, President George H.W. Bush pardoned 6 officials in the Iran-Contra scandal, including Caspar Weinberger, Robert McFarlane, and Elliot Abrams, days before Weinberger's trial. Independent counsel Lawrence Walsh blasted the move, arguing it foreclosed a fuller accounting of clandestine arms sales to Iran and the diversion of proceeds to the Nicaraguan Contras. Supporters called the pardons an overdue mercy that spared aging public servants a politicized spectacle. Detractors saw a final act of loyal protection that kept the most sensitive questions: who approved what, when, sealed off from sworn testimony. Either way, the signature on that Christmas Eve document closed the courtroom door. History was about to open. Oil, timing, and a no action. Letter, Harkin, Bahrain, and the SEC. In 1990, tiny Harkin Energy, on whose board George W. Bush sat, won surprising offshore drilling rights in Bahrain, a plum many expected to go to oil majors. That June 22nd, Bush sold 212,140 Harkin shares for about $848,000. Weeks later, Harkin announced large losses. The stock fell. The SEC opened an insider trading probe and, after interviews and document reviews, issued no enforcement action. To defenders, that's the end of it. To critics, the optics still jar: a politically connected minnow landing a Gulf concession, a well-timed sale by a director, a regulatory letter that closes the loop, but not the public suspicion. Years later, the episode remains a case study in how legal and looks bad can coexist in American political business. The Carlyle Web, Saudi Money, Bin Laden's, and Post-9/11 Optics. After leaving office, George H.W. Bush advised the Carlyle Group, a private equity firm with deep defense holdings whose roster included former prime ministers and cabinet stars. In the late 1990s and into 2001, members of the Bin Laden family, not Osama, invested in Carlyle funds. They withdrew after 9/11. Separately, more than a dozen Bin Laden relatives departed the U.S. by charter in the days after the attacks, with federal clearance, adding fuel to media questions about favoritism and speed. No evidence shows wrongdoing by the family investors or Carlyle, and bipartisan officials signed off on the flights. But in politics, optics matter: a Bush-linked investment house, Saudi capital, wartime contracts, and a terror mastermind sharing a surname with former limited partners. That juxtaposition was always going to explode on cable news. One family, many headlines. The personal turbulence reel. Private turbulence turned public. George W. Bush pled guilty to a 1976 DUI in Maine, about $150 fine, and later said he quit drinking on his 40th birthday in 1986, central to his faith and discipline arc. In 2001, twins Jenna and Barbara were cited in Texas for underage drinking. One incident involved a borrowed ID, Barbara Pierce, their grandmother's maiden name. Noelle Bush, Jeb's daughter, was arrested in 2002 over a forged prescription, struggled with rehab compliance, and briefly served time for violations. Jeb asked for privacy and compassion. Columba Bush paid about $4,100 in 1999 for failing to declare Paris luxury purchases. Neil Bush, a Silverado S and L director, sat amid a collapse that cost taxpayers approximately $1 billion. Civil suits ended in a $49.5 million settlement, with $50,000 personally from Neil. Insurers covered most. Together, these episodes reinforced a narrative that privilege can't shield a family from public consequences. And in 2004, Rothergate erupted. On September 8. CBS aired a Texas Air National Guard story using documents later challenged as forgeries. The network apologized, ran an internal review, and Dan Rather ultimately departed, an expose that boomeranged into a press ethics scandal.